Hello and welcome back to Gapeys Garden. This might be the last pepper update of the season because we're starting to see some pretty cold temperatures at night. We've been seeing a few nights getting down into the 30s Fahrenheit, and that is not good for peppers. So far the peppers are still alive, but I'm gonna start covering them up at night because it's a little too cold for comfort, and we still have a lot of pods on the plants, and I want to be able to harvest them before it freezes. So let's take a look and see how everything is doing. We're going to start here with the outside the greenhouse peppers. These are in a raised bed, and mostly we have Mexican peppers over here, which are annuum varieties. This one here is the guajillo, and the leaves are getting a little wilty because, and I think this is why, check out the hole. I don't know if you can see that, but there is a big hole at the bottom of the plant. We've had some issues in this bed with voles and mice, so they are just really wreaking havoc in here. They did dig up one of my celeries, and the cucumbers over here aren't looking so great either. But the peppers are still alive, just not looking that great. I'm not sure how much longer this one is going to last with the roots getting messed up like that. But we do have quite a few pods on here. They're not super big. We've got one here. I did harvest a couple of these actually, and made a stew out of them. And we got a few here. They're actually starting to turn color a little bit. You can see that's kind of a darker brownish color. And then behind that we have got two pasillas, and the pasillas are a lot skinnier. I don't know if I haven't seen any turn red yet, but I did harvest some of these that are dark green and also used some of those in the stew that I made. So I've got two of those peppers, both kind of doing similar, not super productive. Now this one was a pretty big disappointment. This was my Craig's Grande jalapeno. It never really got very big. I think I harvested maybe one or two peppers off of it, but it's not as big as I was thinking it was going to get as far as the pods and the plant goes. So I'm not sure I'm going to grow this one again, at least not outside. Maybe I'll try it in the greenhouse. So that one was kind of disappointment. And then these four here that are in the middle row, these are all early jalapenos. This one is looking pretty productive. I did make some jalapeno poppers wrapped in bacon, or actually it was prosciutto, the other day, which was really tasty. But these peppers aren't really that big either. The three here were all from a friend of mine that started these that I bought from. And then the last one over here is one that I started from seed, which is the biggest one. And this one has got quite a few pods on it. We've got one here that's starting to turn red. And we have had a rodent or a bug or something that's been eating some holes in some of the peppers. So I'm not sure what's causing that, but most of them have been pretty good, and they are getting some purple tinge to the pod, which is kind of neat. The last two over here are the chili tepins, and they are both have a very different growth habit. So this one here is really tall. It was very, very late to set pods, and it's still getting some little white flowers. I haven't harvested any from these. They're still pretty green, but it does have quite a few pods. And then the one behind it is the exact same pepper, but you can see it's very, very short and has lots of ripe peppers and green ones. So I've harvested quite a few from that one, and I'm just going to be drying those and making a powder out of them. The other ones that I have outside are the mini brown Rocotos. So these are a very young cross of the, I think, XL brown Rocoto and the mini olive Rocoto. And they should be kind of a small pod. Let me see if I can find some. This one, I have two different plants and they both look very different. So this one has much larger pods than the other one. So there's a ripe one that is the brown, I think that it should be, but the shape is much larger than what the desire is. We've got one ripe one there and another ripe one down here. So I have not harvested any off of this particular plant, but I have harvested some off of its neighbor. and this neighbor one is a much tinier pod. You can see how teeny tiny that is, and they just fall right off of the stem once they're ripe. So they're really neat. So this is not the desired color, but I think this is closer to the size and shape that is desired. Here are my two Tangerine Tigers that I have in containers. They are both not doing super great. They lost a lot of leaves and they do seem to wrinkle fairly quickly. So this plant here on the left doesn't have as thick of skin as the other one, so it seems to wrinkle much more quickly than the other one. And I probably should have harvested these a while ago, but they're still on the plant, and I'm not sure I'm going to save seeds from this one, but I will probably save seeds from this one because this one is more like what I want to see. So the pods are a little bit lighter colored, kind of more of a yellow, and they have the orange striping. I did get one pod that did not have stripes, so that is the only one that was like that, so I'm definitely not going to save seeds from that pod. So this plant has much thicker walled pods, which is what I want because they seem to last longer on the plant, and they're just, I like the thicker walls. They do take longer to ripen though, which is kind of unfortunate, but that's the price you got to pay, I guess. But this is a little bit more like the F2 that I grew last year. So I will be saving seeds from that and probably growing them out next year and see what we end up with. I've sent several seeds of this F3 to people last year, and a lot of people have been growing it, and I'm seeing a lot of variation in the shapes that other people are growing. So I've had some people send me seeds, so we'll have to try those out next year and see what we end up with. Time to take a look at the pepper jungle that we have in the greenhouse. We've got our two tomatoes growing here on the left side, which are doing really good. Lots of tomatoes ripening on that. And we've got our basil here that is going crazy that I really need to make some pesto with. So hiding here between my two basil plants is the Baccatum peppers. And this one here is called Creola, and it gets some pretty tiny or smallish yellow orange peppers, and they're fairly spicy. Oh, this one looks like it's drying on the pod. I really need to do a big harvest of the peppers here pretty soon before they all die off. But we have lots of peppers. I haven't decided if I'm going to make a hot sauce this year or not because I still have a ton of hot sauce from the last few years. But this one is very productive. It stays pretty short compared to most Baccatums, so it doesn't really need a cage, but I do have a Y stake around it just to keep the kind of longish branches from dragging on the ground. So it's done pretty well for being covered in basil. Now back here we've got our Sugar Rush Red. This is the first year I've grown the red variation, but I've grown the striped and the peach before. The red seems to ripen maybe a little bit faster than the other two, but we have quite a few pods in here. Many of them are ready to harvest, and we still have quite a few that are just starting to turn or are still green. But this plant has definitely needs a cage for this one because it can get pretty tall. So you can see there's a branch going all the way out and all the way over, and this branch is pretty loaded with pepper pods too. We've got a couple pretty tall branches here. And then the last Baccatum we have here is the Ahi Guyana. So I meant to grow the Ahi pineapple this year, but my seeds didn't germinate. So this was my backup plan. So I got the Ahi Guyana, and it's kind of a longish yellow-orange pod, pretty much the same color as the Creola actually, but very differently shaped. And it's a very kind of fruity, kind of ahi. Ahi kind of has a unique flavor, but it's pretty traditional ahi flavor and fairly spicy. I might just make a hot sauce using kind of this yellow-orange pods because I have so many pods this year that are this color. So I think that might make a really good hot sauce. Now this really big bushy thing we have growing in the back corner of the greenhouse is not a pepper, but it is a cucamelon. And these are basically little melon-shaped cucumbers. That's why they call it cucamelon. But these are really tasty, kind of slightly sour cucumbers that are really fun to grow, but they do tend to take over if you let them. But I do have them growing on a kind of a trellis in the back. I thought I'd give you a little look at what that looks like. It's a fun little plant to grow. So as you can see, it likes to vine out, so you do have to keep an eye on it if you plant it near other things, because it does keep getting in the peppers, and I keep having to pull it off. So I'm gonna have to give that a trim here pretty soon. But this huge pepper down here is a bubble gum. This is a sweet bubble gum that I saved seeds from Bill Beckham, who sent me some pods of it. Now, he said it was a sweet and not hot pepper, but I thought it was pretty hot, to be honest, but maybe not as hot as most bubblegum varieties. But it is a really neat pepper, and my first time successfully growing a bubblegum. Well, I showed this in the last update, but these are really neat because look how orange the calyx here and the stem are. So normally peppers do not change color, but the bubblegums have the same color as the pod, which is a really, really neat feature of those. But I've tried growing these before and was not successful for a few different reasons. This pepper here, maybe I left it on too long, or I don't know what happened, but this one you can see is a little bit, I don't know if that's blossom end rot or just stayed on the plant too long, but that one is not going to be good to eat, so that one's going to go in the compost. Now back here is a yellow pepper variety called Benny Highland. So this is a Chinense variety, just like the bubblegum, and Chinense varieties are typically your hotter peppers, and these two are both fairly hot. And these were the only two Chinense varieties that I grew this year. So this is another one that might be good to add to my hot sauce to give it a little bit more heat. This here is the Gaby Hot Wax, and wax peppers typically aren't very hot, but this one is a hot wax, so it has a little bit more heat than your typical wax pepper. But the plan for this one is to smoke or cold smoke these pods and then make a powder out of them. So this is the first time I've ever grown a wax pepper, and that seems to be a good use for those. Now this one here is probably my most productive pepper. This is the Fushimi, and I think I mentioned in the previous update that this is normally used when it's green, but we've got quite a few red peppers on here as well that I've been meaning to harvest them before they get this red, but there's just so many, it's hard to keep up. But I like adding these to stir fries or putting them up on the grill, and it's just loaded with peppers. This is I think a Japanese variety, but it's really tasty. But the reason you want to pick them before they turn this red is because the peppers start getting a little bit soft once they turn red, so you want to get them before they turn that red. Here we have the mini chocolate pepper, and I do have a small tomato cage around this one that did get fairly large, and the branches are pretty long and kind of spindly, so it really needed a cage. But we've got quite a few ripe peppers in there. They are nice dark brown color, almost the same color as that Rocoto pepper that I showed earlier, which is a chocolate variety. So these are the only two chocolate varieties that I grew this year, but this was also one that I grew in a can, which I'll show you at the end of the video. This one here is Criolla de Cochina, and it's the only pepper that I've had problems with this year with some blossom end rot. I'm not sure if we've got any more of those, but the first few that I've harvested had some problem with blossom end rot on the bottom. I haven't actually tasted this one yet, but I think this is supposed to be kind of a sweet bell pepper with some heat. But the shape has it's kind of a bell shape, but it's got a lot of pretty deep ridges on the pods. It's kind of a neat shape. This one is the Chloe's Sweet Tangerine, and it is the sweetest pepper I think I've tried. And I got this one from Timothy Moultrup, and it has some pretty orange, yellowish pods, which I might also use in a hot sauce. But it's the same kind of color as those other peppers that I showed before. But most of the peppers on this plant are formed way at the bottom of the plant and not a whole lot up towards the top. So it's kind of growing a little bit weird compared to last year and doesn't seem to be as productive. But I'll definitely grow it again next year because this is a really tasty sweet pepper. And here's another pepper that's got the yellow-orange color that I'm thinking of making a hot sauce with. So these will definitely go in that if I make some. This is called the bell room, which is a cross between a bell pepper and a mushroom pepper. And it is very sweet like a bell pepper, but it also has a little bit of heat kind of towards the center and the placenta. It's a really, really tasty pepper, and I'll probably grow that again next year. Here's another orangish yellow pepper. That is the orange Lecia, so same color as the other orange yellowish peppers that I'm growing. But this one is a purely sweet pepper, no heat on this one at all. So I'm not sure I'll add this one to a hot sauce. Maybe if I run out of peppers, I might add it, but this is a really sweet and tasty pepper. I'd rather just eat this fresh than use it in a hot sauce. Now this little bushy guy is the Peter pepper. It has a really nice form actually, but it is not looking, at least the pods don't look like they're supposed to. So they're kind of wrinkly and kind of curvy, just not really what the Peter pepper is supposed to look like. And I haven't actually gotten any ripe ones yet, so I'm not sure if these are going to turn ripe here pretty soon. And here's another look at what the pods are looking like. I might try growing this again with different seeds. I'm waiting for some ripe ones so I can give it a taste and see how it is. Now these next two peppers here are my tallest peppers, and they look almost identical, but they're supposed to be two different varieties. So this one here is the Aconcagua, and this is one of the few peppers that I'm growing this year that I've grown before, but they are a really sweet, nice, big, probably good for stuffing with meat or something. I think I'll try that with these, but they're huge peppers. They're very sweet, and look at the size of this thing. They're just huge. And then the pepper next to that was supposed to be the Antohi Romanian, but it's not looking like it's supposed to. It's actually looking very much like the Aconcagua. And we've got, I think, just one. It seems to be taking a little bit longer to ripen than the Aconcagua, but we've got a couple back there. I think we've got one that's ready there and another one next to it that should be ready here pretty soon. And I really wish I had put a cage around this one, because the branches are just getting really heavy with these stinking huge pods. I mean, look at that thing. It's pretty crazy. So this thing is probably going to snap here if I don't support it some more. But I do have some stakes in here, and I've got these clips that are attached to it. But you can see the stem is bent there, so I might have to do something with that. Actually, I can probably put it over here and help support it with the other cage next to it. Now here's the shishito pepper, which I've grown several times before, and it's normally super productive, but this year it doesn't seem to be quite as productive as it normally is. And I have harvested quite a few pods on it, but it just isn't getting quite as big as it has in years past. And the leaves seem a lot darker than they normally do, so possibly this got crossed with something. Peppers cross-pollinate very, very easily, so unless you isolate your peppers, it's very likely that they'll cross. And I do a lot of seed swapping, so who knows what this could have crossed with. Now, this is the last of my orangish yellow pods that I would probably include in my hot sauce. So this is the Tequila Sunrise, and it's mostly sweet, but it does have just a little bit of heat to it. Not really very much, but this is a very productive plant as well. So I think this would be a really good addition to a hot sauce if I make one. Now the last pepper that we have in the greenhouse is my favorite pepper, but not this particular variety. So this is a Korean gochu, which you can find many different varieties of Korean gochu. This one is called the Hong gochu, and it's much larger than a lot of the other Korean gochus that you can find, and also it is very, very mild. So there's almost no heat to these pods at all, which is much different than the gochus that I've grown in the past. The ones I've grown in the past have been really hot and actually a little bit too hot for me. So I think taking this variety and blending it with one of the hotter varieties would be really good, because this is a really productive plant like most of the Korean gochus, but this is the only Korean gochu that I grew this year, unfortunately. So I'm probably gonna, I might smoke this one too and make a smoked Korean gochu powder out of it. We'll have to wait and see, but next year I think I'll grow this variety and maybe one or two other hotter varieties and then mix them together. I think that would be really good. All right, I saved the best for last again. We've got our peppers in a can, so I've got 3 of those that I'm growing this year. This one here is called Marbles, which is a ornamental variety, and it looks just like marbles. This is the only one that is starting to ripen. You can see there's a ripe pod, or one that's turning ripe here. I think they might end up red, but right now that one is kind of an orange. Oh, looks like there's a fig that fell off of one of my fig trees. But we've got lots of pods on here. This is one that nearly died at the beginning of the season, but it did bounce back pretty well. And this one is in a Dilliner Weiss dill beer can, which is an interesting combination. Now, our next one is my only purple leafed variety that I'm growing this year, and it's called the Count Dracula. And this one is in a hard kombucha pineapple chili can. So we do have quite a few pods on here, and they start out purple and eventually they will be turning red, but we don't have any ripe ones yet, but we just got a few purple ones there. Now the last one, this is our chocolate bell or mini bell. This is the only pod. It looks like it's starting to turn slightly brown, but for the most part those are not ripe yet. And I've got this stake here to help support it because it was starting to fall over, and I probably should trim it a little bit because it is a little bit heavy to one side. But we should start seeing those ripening up here pretty soon. All right, that's a wrap for our September pepper update. I'm not sure if there's going to be an October one or not. The season may end before then. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.